Hey guys, it's the facelessbeanie, and a while back I made an affinity guide that went over the basics of affinity and farming methods. But some stuff has changed since then, so this is an updated affinity farming guide including the best methods to farm affinity. Let's get right into it. Affinity is experience. You gain it by killing enemies, completing missions, hacking terminals, or picking up affinity orbs. You can only gain affinity that counts towards your mastery rank from each weapon, companion, Archwing, Necramech, and Warframe once. That is the first time you rank them to level 30, or for Kuwa weapons, the Paracesis and Necramechs, this applies till level 40 instead. Using Forma on a weapon or Warframe does not grant you mastery points, unless you're using Forma on a Kuwa weapon, the Paracesis, or a Necramech to get them beyond level 30. Let's move on to how affinity is split. For weapons, killing an enemy with a weapon will grant 50% of affinity gained from that kill to your weapon, while the other 50% goes to your Warframe. For Warframes, killing an enemy with the Warframe's ability will grant 100% of affinity gained to your Warframe, and this includes exalted weapons. The aforementioned logic applies to spoiler mode and amps as well. For companions, if the companion kills an enemy with an ability, all affinity gain goes to the companion. If it kills an enemy with its weapon, then it receives 50% of the gained affinity, with the remaining 50% going to the weapon. When in a squad and nearby squad mates, you'll gain affinity from their kills. As a general rule, 25% of all shared affinity goes to your Warframe, while the remainder is evenly split among your weapons. Your companions also receive shared affinity without taking any away from what your Warframe or equipped weapons receive. A companion will split shared affinity with his weapon if equipped, or gain all shared affinity if no weapon is equipped. Note that fully ranked equipment will still accumulate affinity and affects the affinity split with your other weapons. Therefore, if leveling a specific weapon, it's best to just equip that weapon alone. To increase affinity gains, an affinity booster is recommended, as well as a Smita Kavat for her affinity buff from Charm, which can double affinity for a 120-second period and stacks with an affinity booster. Let's move on to affinity farming. For beginners, the best spots are dark sector missions on any planet that you have unlocked. These missions provide a small affinity buff that make them more worthwhile to farm affinity in than regular missions. For general affinity farming, the obvious spot is Hydron on Setna. This is the preferred way for many players to farm affinity, and you'll always be able to find a quick squad to go through 10 waves or more together. A lower level alternative which has minimal differences but better resource drops is Helene on Saturn. The best general affinity farming method and location is Gyan Point in the Vale Proxima in Railjack. You don't necessarily need your own Railjack for this, you can board someone else's and reap the affinity benefits. If you're doing it solo though, the most important avionic is Tether to quickly dispose of enemy fighter jets. Completing Gyan Point twice with a booster will be enough to fully rank up a weapon from 0 to 30, which should take less than 10 minutes. You can also easily level up Warframes, Archwings, and Arc Guns this way. Let's get into some alternatives. For affinity farming for weapons specifically, Adaro on Setna is a great solo spot to go to. However, to fully utilize this method, you'll need an Equinox or Banshee. The idea is to make use of the stealth kill affinity multiplier. Killing unaware enemies triggers this bonus, which caps out at 5 unaware enemies killed in a row for a 500% affinity bonus, which then stays active as long as you keep killing unaware enemies. As soon as an enemy is alerted, however, your bonus immediately resets to 0. First up, Equinox. Using Equinox in night form, cast Rest on a group of enemies in a room and proceed to kill them with the weapon you're trying to rank up. Be sure to put all enemies in a room to sleep first to prevent any chance of your affinity multiplier diminishing. Then Banshee. She works the same way by casting Silence. Banshee's advantage is her passive turns every equipped weapon to silent, which means its gunfire will not alert enemies. Couple this with the silence ability to quickly run through rooms of enemies and clear them. Do note that for both of these methods you'll need a weapon that can somewhat 1 to 2 hit enemies, otherwise they'll still be alerted regardless, and this method's efficiency will reduce as a result. You'll be able to fully rank up a weapon by completing Adaro 1 to 2 times with a booster, depending on how long you can sustain the stealth multiplier. Alternatively, head to the Elite Sanctuary Onslaught with the squad. Bring along a Trinity to support your teammates with energy, or Equinox or Rhino to buff their damage. Ensure you do some killing as well. With a decent squad, optimally one with a Sarin, you'll be able to max out your weapon of choice within 2 waves with an active booster. You can also attempt spy missions, preferably ones on Neptune, Sedna or Pluto, as they'll all give you 4000 affinity per successful data vault hack, which is tripled if you complete a hack without triggering alarms. Obviously, this is a better affinity farm for weapons instead of Warframes, as you'll need a stealth Warframe like Loki, Ivara, or another Warframe like Limbo or Wukong to efficiently complete these missions. Next, affinity farming for Warframes specifically. For this, ensure you only equip one weapon at a time to minimize the affinity wasted. Optimally, if you have spoiler mode unlocked, you'll want to equip Naramon's affinity spike and a decent melee weapon to ensure maximum affinity gains for your Warframe. The first method is of course Sanctuary Onslaught, which is highly dependent on your squad. If you can make it to the 8th zone with an affinity booster, your Warframe should be maxed out, assuming there was constant affinity shared and you were killing your own fair share of enemies as well. Otherwise, it'll take a few more zones. The next two are solo methods but require access to the Helmin system or the Steel Path. Sacrificing an Equinox to the Helmin will grant you Rest or Rage, and you can infuse that ability on any Warframe you wish to level up. Similar to the Adaro method for weapons, you'll cast Rest or Rage, but here you'll kill enemies with your only weapon equipped, which should be a melee weapon. An optimal arcane to equip here is Arcane Trickery that gives you a chance to turn invisible for 15 seconds on a finisher kill, which comes in really handy to remain undetected. If you have access to the Steel Path, you don't need Rest and Rage. Just mod your Warframe with basic survivability mods and use a strong melee weapon like the Cronin Prime, a Plague Zor, or any other melee with decent crit chance and attack speed. You'll need more protection in the Steel Path, so Spoiler Mode's Vazarin Dash is highly recommended to give you a temporary invulnerability buff. If you have a Panzer Wolbafila, use it here as well. Go to Selkie on Sedna or Taviuni in the Kua Fortress. Try to find a narrow corridor where enemies continuously spawn and keep killing them while using Vazarin Dash to keep yourself alive. You should be able to max out a Warframe in 20 minutes or so. For your Archwing, the best spot is Salasea on Neptune. This mobile defense mission should be attempted with the squad, and make sure to stay within squad affinity range to benefit the most. Do note that arc guns and arc melees should be leveled up using the weapon specific farming method shown instead of relying on Salasea. They'll be much faster. Finally, Necramechs. At the time of this video, Necramechs are not deployable in regular missions, aside from Operation Orphix Venom. So if you don't have an organized squad, your best bets are the Thermia Fractures, if they're active. Tons of enemies spawn when sealing canisters, so you can pop into your Necramech and fire away. Otherwise, stick to taking over Corpus bases in Fortuna free roam, preferably solo. You can either do all 10 bases or alternate between these 3. With that, that's about it. I hope this helped you out. This is the Faceless Beanie signing out.